The strangers within, how they affect the spiritual direction practice and what to do with them. All of us has the strangers within. Hi, I'm Esther and I'm a sister at Transfiguration Hermitage, a small community in Maine following the rule of Saint Benedict. I'm also a student of Spiritual Direction Certification Program at St. John's University, Minnesota. Over the past 2 years, I've been introduced to the notion of strangers within in my verbatim reflections of my spiritual direction practice. In this short talk, I will do a quick intro to those strangers and how they can play a big role in the spiritual direction process. This talk is mostly for spiritual directors, but directees can also gain some insights from watching this video. So, who is the strangers within and why do we have to attend to them? During spiritual direction session, have you ever experienced that all of a sudden you are gripped with unexplainable emotions or intense reaction? Have you ever gotten so wrapped up in your head that you were having difficulty paying attention to the directee? I certainly have. In one session, I felt overwhelming sense of inferiority and self-consciousness. I feel like a small child and my directee was towering high in front of me. I got so wrapped up in my own dread that I failed to be fully present to that directee. This usually means that I was encountering the strangers within myself, and it has taken the driver's seat in my mind. In psychological notions, the strangers within are equivalent to the shadow in Carl Jung's psychology, or the exiles in internal family system therapy. They are basically parts of us, but sometimes we are not even aware that they actually exist. They are part of us, they are suppressed, repressed, rejected, abandoned, forgotten, buried down. If you are familiar with The Guest House, a poem by Rumi, it can give us some idea about the manifestation of our strangers within. Pause this video if you'd like to read the whole poem. Otherwise, let's move on. Why do we have to attend to the strangers within? As in my story, the strangers within can hinder us from being fully present and listening to our directee. We are not free to be attentive to our directee. Our responsibility as spiritual directors is to heal this unfreedom for the sake of our directee and for our own growth. SDI Guideline for Ethical Conduct, under the heading of Spiritual Director and Self, states that spiritual directors engage in ongoing formation and continuing education by nurturing self-knowledge and freedom. The question now is, how? The keyword is hospitality. The Bible and church teachings provide many exhortation and examples on hospitality to strangers. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourselves, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Abraham welcomed 3 angels. Jesus and the Samaritan women at the well. Jesus healed 10 men with leprosy. The parable of the Good Samaritan. Last but not least, I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you visited me. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Saint Benedict in his rule exhorts each one of us to be hospitable to guests and strangers. All guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ. Care for the sick must rank above and before all else, so that they may truly be served as Christ. Now I would like to invite you to be hospitable, not just to the external strangers that we can see, but more importantly to the strangers within, both within ourselves and within our directee. Before we are able to be hospitable to the strangers within, we need to first be able to identify them. The strangers within usually can be spotted through unusual external behaviors, observable through body language such as jittery, shuffling constantly, avoiding eye contact, hunching, a fight or flight response, resistance, avoidance, intense or overwhelming emotions, especially when they are unexplainable, such as unease, anger, irritation, sadness, inferiority, insecurity, hopelessness, shame, and many other challenging emotions. Now, let's move on how to be hospitable to these strangers. Before we proceed, please remember this. When you feel that you are starting to get overwhelmed in the process of being with your strangers within, stop immediately yet gently. Hold the strangers and offer them to God. Then offer the process and your whole self to God. Afterwards, proceed to the self-care method, whatever method that is most beneficial for you. The most crucial step is to cultivate self-awareness with whatever way is most suitable for you. Meditations, centering prayer, journaling, and etc. Have the disposition of compassion. We pray that God will grace us with the spirit of compassion. Invite and approach our strangers in a non-judgmental and loving stance. Imagine yourself like a mother caring for her young, or a physician caring for the sick, or an animal rescuer trying to approach a fearful stray animal, or whatever image that will help you to be in that loving stance. Remember that these strangers mean no harm. Most of them are young parts of us who do not know any better. Invoke a sense of sympathy and empathy towards them, but remember to keep your own boundary. Try to avoid blending in or being overwhelmed. Withdraw gently when you feel that you are getting close to your limit. It is helpful to approach one stranger at a time. Try to be attentive and fully present to the stranger, much like we are trying to be attentive and fully present to a directee. Notice and be curious to the stranger. Ask and observe. What are your characteristics? How old are you? What might you be thinking about? What do you feel right now? What are you fearful of? What or where do you feel hurt? What is the burden that you have been carrying all along? May I share it with you? Be respectful. Most strangers are fearful and sensitive to boundaries. Be patient. Much as in the spiritual direction process, trust the process and let the Spirit guide you. You might feel some resistance towards the strangers. That's normal. Stay compassionate and curious as best as you can. Be open to whatever comes. Try to communicate with a stranger whenever the stranger is open to interact with you. Offer compassion, gentleness, sympathy, or any kind of loving gesture. Offer help to the stranger so that they can let go of their burden. The idea is to make them feel safe with you, being heard and loved unconditionally, and eventually being healed. Now, what should we do when we encounter the strangers within our directee? The process is basically the same, but it will require a few extra steps beforehand. Because of course, we need the directee's permission to initiate the process. When opportunity arises, try to invite the directee to be aware and attentive to their strangers. Guide the process using the previous method if the directee is open to it. If not, trust that God will find a way, either through you or through other means. Finally, the glory of God is the human person wholly alive. The person who achieves wholeness or integration possesses an attitude that is beyond the reach of emotional entanglements and violent shocks. In other words, we become freer, free to listen to ourselves and our directees, free from judgments, narration forming, and emotional baggage. We become whole as how God created us to be in His image and likeness. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to know more about the strangers within, I put a list of books worth reading in the video description. Thank you very much for freepik.com, benson.com, Rumi, Samuel Raberg, Tamara Moore, all my friends in this spiritual direction program, countless of people who have become my companions on this journey towards wholeness, and a very special thanks to Brother Benedict. Bye for now and blessings.